Welcome back to the Hey Sue podcast. You are in the midst of the Never Ask for the Sale edition of the podcast, where I get a chance to talk to sellers, CEOs, founders, people growing businesses in a way that I think lines up extremely well with the mindset that I advocate for in my book, Never Ask for the Sale. If you want to learn more about the book, visit heysue.com/book, or just go take a risk and buy the book anywhere you can buy books. It's Never Asked for the Sale. Today, I get the chance to welcome a guest that just means a lot to me personally, in part because the very office I'm sitting in, if you happen to be watching this episode on YouTube, which you can do, was actually made possible by him. And you can't tell really how amazing it is by looking just at this view, but not only did he do a ton of work in the house I live in now, but he also designed a home that was part of a little 3-part co-housing project in Boulder, Colorado, that was featured in the New York Times. And that's the least of it. Our guest today is EJ Meade. He is the founder and CEO of ARC11 architecture firm. His contemporary modern design sensibility is matched only by his ability to surprise and delight. And as somebody who's gotten a chance to actually build homes that he's envisioned and live in them and discovered things that I didn't even know were there until I got to live there, even for a little while, and how brilliant those things were. Yeah, he's a genius. And he's an amazing seller of his gifts. So please join me in welcoming EJ Meade from ARC11. Hi, EJ.
Hey, Sue. Good to see you.
It's
Been a
so
while.
great to see you. Thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation, which I've had a chance to have in snippets, but we've really never had a chance to have a concentrated conversation on this topic. I'm really excited about it.
Good. I was a little intimidated, but I'm excited about it myself. It gave me pause to think about what it is I do and how we carry the message across. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think that's part of what I'm after. Like part of what I admire about how you've grown ARC11 and how you really navigate the world is that some of it feels unintentional. And I think that is a big part of what makes you successful. So putting our eye on the thing that may be unintentional, I don't know, it might ruin you forever, but let's take the risk.
no, that's fine. I think it was yeah, unintentional, accidental. I as a small child, I got pushed out to sea in a rowboat once, and when my 8-year-old friend and I finally got to shore, this fellow said to me, "I don't know whether you're brave or foolhardy for what you guys undertook." And I kind of feel that way about starting an architecture firm. I
Huh.
was I was naive enough and was unsure whether I was brave or foolhardy in doing it. Uh,
Huh.
but
Well, when I think about that, EJ, I think about like starting. There are a lot of people who will listen to this and who will read Never Ask for the Sale, and they will either be thinking about starting something or they have just started something, especially in this economy. A lot of people are either voluntarily or involuntarily leaving what they thought were secure jobs and starting something new. Can you talk a little bit about that formation stage? Because it's interesting to hear you think, like, did you think in that moment that it felt risky?
oh no, in that moment, it felt like the only option.
Why?
I had finished graduate school, was back in Boulder. I had gotten a little teaching gig at CU, and it just seemed like rather than go work for someone else, it seemed like if I was experimenting with ideas in the classroom, I could try to somehow reify those in reality. It just seemed like a natural thing to do. I'd always worked for myself. Previously, I was a carpenter and craftsman for 6 or 7 years between undergraduate and graduate school, and yeah, it felt very organic at the time. And you look back on it, you're like, wow, thank God for naivety and a very patient partner at the time, my wife at the time. So
Yeah. Did you name the firm ARC11 at the beginning?
Yeah. Well, no, I actually had a partnership called Praxis Design with a fellow that lasted a couple of years, and we did maybe half a dozen projects, and then he went back into the engineering world, and then I started teaching and connected with a couple of other people like minds at the university, and I got a few projects and asked for their help, and came home. And we were like, we got to put together a real name for this thing. And we had the Latin dictionary out for things, and there was some Gaelic word for some tool that cleaved off slate shingles. And my late wife said to me, quoting a Rob Reiner line from This Is Spinal Tap, how about Arch11? It's one more than 10. And she said it jokingly, I think, but it kind of gave pause, and I was like, it's got some humor to it. It sounds somewhat professional in the numerology world. People can play with this prime number between 10 and 12. And yeah, there we are.
Oh, that's great. I never heard that story. I love that story. If you're listening and you've never watched Spinal Tap but only seen memes, it really is worth watching the whole film. It's more than just one line. Um, so EJ, how would you describe the sensibility of your work?
Oh, that is that's been a 30-year in the making conversation. Um, I think our work, uh, the elevator pitch is that we do modern spaces specific to place that um, present a sense of awe. Now, whether that's the sensibility or not, that's really an intent. I think the sensibility comes out of a a the simplicity of a craft background, and I don't mean that in the like traditional craftsmanship, but more in the ethic of making. That we're very concerned with the specifics of making a place, of how materials meet, of making something durable, making something that reveals the unexpected.
I just mentioned that in my introduction of you because, as you know, I've had the chance to live in sort of at least one, if not two homes that you've been in, well, one that you designed entirely. And I was just talking to the audience about how when you get to live in a home that you have created, you discover things about the home that far exceed your expectations that you don't remember seeing in the plans and that are just magical. And that's amazing considering the steps one goes through when building a house and how much attention, well, I place less attention on this than most people, but because I had just trust brilliant people like you. But and it happened again. You did a renovation of the house I'm living in now, and there's this one detail in one of the walls, and I didn't know about it. And so just that experience of being awed by your craftsmanship is really awesome.
Yeah, I think the role of architecture is to not invent anything, but kind of reposit reality, give you a new view of it,
Huh.
allow
Okay,
you
EJ.
to kind of see what you might not, or to see things differently, or to see it in a different way.
Yeah.
The lens.
Okay, EJ, I'm going to ask you to do something that is, I don't think natural to you, but I'm going to ask you to do it because really I understand that you run a company and
Mhm.
that is no small feat in this field, and that you've been successful at that for 30 years. And that is even more impressive a feat. But I want you to talk about yourself. So if you're willing, I'd like you to shift the pronoun from we to I.
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Okay. And part of that is I want to put some attention on how this business has grown. And I know that you've had partners and team members who are extremely talented. I'm lucky enough to have met and worked with many of them. And my story is that most of the business growth and selling has been done by you over the years.
I would say that is true. Yeah. I,
Cool. Okay. So when one is selling architecture, there are a few
Mhm.
things that arise for me. One is that not everyone even thinks, I think not everyone thinks it's necessary. I'm
Okay.
not sure. That's a story I have because there are people that say they're design build firms. So my story is they're ruling out an architect. So
Mhm.
they view it as potentially like an extra expense that may be discretionary. I have other stories that as an architect, you end up creating things that never actually get built, and that
Mhm.
is complex. And in any event, you're selling an idea like the one you just talked about that where when I asked about your sensibility. So what is it like to market you as an architect and your firm?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, historically, and the education of an architect, they don't talk about that at all. There's really, I think, throughout architecture schools, this myth of genius that somehow you'll be recognized just for making outstanding things. And there's almost, I think, a scorn in the profession for selling and marketing, right? There's this myth of the lone genius, which is just that. It's just a myth. Um, I think it took me a while to be comfortable with the idea that I was, to use a phrase, selling a service and it got much easier when I realized how much I believe in what I do. And as the practice grew and we became more confident, or I became more confident in what we could put together, um, what where we could build on impossible sites with impossible budgets, or when we were given a really good budget and we could handle it really well, um, that confidence just allowed me to speak about the work much more, more passionately and with more conviction. And you mentioned the design build. I think there's a lot of perception that architecture is gives you a sort of a consumer object. And I think there's a whole kind of bit of maybe the profession or the building industry that does just that. They build a consumer object. And what I really we set ourselves apart is we're selling a process of discovery for people. They're trusting us with a lot of resources and probably the biggest investment they're going to make in their lifetime. And that's whether that's a house or it's their shareholders' money in a corporate headquarters. Um, and get, usually the people we are attracting now are starting to understand that this is a process, that we're giving them something that's really specific to who they are and where they are. And that's hard. That's impossible to do as a consumer object. A consumer object is a repeatable um, piece, right? And nothing we do is really ever repeated. There's a sensibility that's repeated. There's an ethic that's repeated, but you don't look at our portfolio and go, oh, they've got a particular style that they're just repeating. We hired a marketing and strategy person 3 years ago, and I told her, I said, you've got a tough battle ahead because we don't have this um, brand that is stylized. We have a brand that's based on an ethic, on building specific to place, on a level of craft and detail that's unsurpassed. Um, and so, as I explained that to her, again, that kind of helped my confidence with understanding what it is we do and being able to take that into what we call the marketplace, or wherever it is that work seems to come from.
EJ, the interesting thing hearing you talk about the process and also the specificity, and I know that you've built homes that have rocks running through the middle of them, and you've built from downtown, from Manhattan to North Carolina to in really interesting and natural settings in the mountains for bare foundations and cool corporate headquarters. Like, you've done so many different things, and I do see them as different when I think
Yes.
about your work. And there is something about you, and my book is about the idea that you are at the center of any sale, that one
Mhm.
is at the center of any sale. And I think you do this effortlessly. And I think this has made it maybe harder for people around you to sell even your own brand because there's some way that you actually maybe have been the brand, or there's just something you're so good at that maybe you can't teach. But how do you are an important part of this process.
True,
From the
true.
beginning of talking to you, you are an important part of this process. What comes up for you when I say that, and how much are you owning that these days?
Um, I would say I'm owning the better part of that. And it is absolutely um, a challenge to groom that in the younger partners and principals in the firm as well, and they're finding their own way. Um, and I've used this term for a long time, that the first piece of architecture is the relationship with the client and who we're working for. And I really do see that as it's architectural, it's designed, it, I love the process of making so much, and I feel that I get really excited by explaining that possibility to a client. Um, I, I don't know how to phrase that any more succinctly. Um, when a client can push back and understand, oh, this is a process. I might not even know what the outcome looks like. In fact, I would say if we give a client, if if we if what ends up when we're done is exactly what they expected, we failed. You know, um, I had a client who, recently we were doing a home for, and there was an entry cantilevered entry uh, platform to it. And he said, "Well, have you ever done this before?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I don't want to be an experiment." And I said, "Well, each project's an experiment, you know." So I get excited when I can infuse that into whom we're going to work with, and they can let go enough of what might be any preconception and partake in a process of discovery.
Right. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about, because I love that. And I love how entrepreneurial that is. And that feels true to me, just experiencing you. And um, you are sitting in a home that you designed for you and your partner. And much of that property in itself feels new. Um, and that must have been its own challenge, but let's not go down that rabbit hole quite yet.
Yeah.
Um, you bill in a way, or you price in a way that is counter to my sense of how genius should price. I, yeah.
What do you say? I'm undervaluing it.
Well, let's talk in a little more detail. Let me be sure I have this right,
Yep.
because I've only seen you through my eyes as a
Mhm.
client. Um, I believe that you and your firm that you bill hourly. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. It's often there's a cap involved. That
Oh, so it's even worse.
it might be worse. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's great. So just to say it out loud, why I'm saying that's worse is one thing I recommend against is this idea of billing hourly, because in my experience, for many people who are awesome at what they do, there's literally no way to capture their value, especially the value they deliver in the first, say, 50 hours of a project, because the value you deliver in the first 50 hours is 50 years of looking at the world through the lens of an artistic, gifted architect.
Mhm.
Um, Starting when you were little, by the way, not that old. Anyway, uh, and so I say, don't do that. Like, come up with a project, a scope, and think about what the value you'd be delivering. And you don't necessarily have to bill for the value,
Right.
but you at least should know what the value is. And I'm curious, and then you have a cap, which is because another thing I recommend is if you are going to bill hourly, at least have a minimum, because I'm sure this is true knowing you. It's certainly true for me. I wake up in the morning all the time with new ideas about projects I'm working on, and those percolated while I was asleep, and there's no chance I'm billing for that time.
Right.
Clients, I hope you're hearing this. I'm not billing you for the time I'm sleeping. Anyway, but you have a cap. So how do you feel about that at this after 30 years of building this firm?
Um, I'm not sure it was the wisest for profitability. It started out as always wanting to get paid for every hour we worked.
Uh,
And there was a simple ethic in that. And um, there also is, I'm in a marketplace, and it is very interesting because when I'm interviewing for a, a project, um, we are not the most expensive firm in the world, and we're not the least expensive firm. And I'm always surprised when someone comes in and says, "Well, so and so can do this for half of what that cap is." And it's a matter of apples and oranges at that point. So part of the cap is to just kind of remain, um, I guess, attractive in a marketplace. Um, that said, there's different marketplaces we work in. Like we're doing a townhome in Manhattan right now, and when I saw what the interior designer was taking for a retainer, I second guessed everything that I do.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you design something, I think the Pearl Izumi corporate headquarters, I know that was a team effort, I imagine, but that I think that won a lot of awards. Am I right about that?
We got a couple of awards, a World Architecture News Award and a local AI award for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you win many awards for many projects. The project you did that I was involved in was in the New York Times as a featured property with like 4 full pages of editorial in the hard copy New York Times, tons of photos, a ridiculous number of photos. And by the way, if you're listening and you go online to New York Times site and search semi-detached solution, you'll see that spread and the photos, and you'll see some of EJ's work, but you'll see way more if you go to arc11.com. That just happens to be the house that I got to live in. When you see that and that thing hits the New York Times, what are the feelings that arise in you? Like, do you feel like you get enough credit for what it's about? Not enough? I don't think you ever get paid for the value you conferred there. How do you feel?
Um,
That's a long time ago. You can
that's
talk about
no,
that
it's a
one.
long time ago. I think there's probably 40 AIA awards in the office at this point, and a couple dozen of others. And the first ones are always exciting, right? And then it's a little bit of, well, geez, they give us an award for that. I don't want to say we're running the mill, but something like the New York Times, that was a great recognition, honestly. Then I felt like, oh, cover of Rolling Stone. Um, that one, that in particular, where someone investigated the project and really explained it. And we've had a couple like that where someone writes about it and the writer really gets it. They understand what the investigation was about. So that feels good. You kind of expect the phone to ring off the hook after those things. It seldom does. Um, as far as the value piece, at the very beginning of my practice, I was approached to design a house up in Devil's Thumb, neighborhood of Boulder. And I was negotiating the fee with the owner. And I said, I'll take 1% of the sales cost of the house when you
Yeah.
sell it. And he shook his head, and we agreed on a ridiculously low number that I worked for. Um, I think I even installed the dumb waiter myself in that house. But the
Who's
house,
the
the house,
dumbwaiter now?
yeah, yeah. The house, was one of the first in the city to sell for more than $1 million, and I would have, done pretty well at the time. This is 30 years ago. Um, so seeing the value of what we do recognized, like something like the article in the Times, or Wall Street Journal's done a piece on others, and various publications. That excites me a lot more than the awards.
Huh.
Um, yeah, that
Because,
I think,
yeah,
how that translates monetarily, I'm not sure.
yeah. How are your feelings now, or what are your feelings now about selling? It sounds like you've been on a journey that you initially did not like this idea. I do think that you're owning more of it now, but like, talk us through your strategy and how this works for you generally.
Wow. Strategy sounds like there's actually a plan involved.
Okay, what do you do? Maybe we'll just do that.
Um, I really believe in what we do. I believe in the craft, and it came out of that. I believe in the ethic. We're doing homes now that produce all their own power. We're finishing a nature center right now that will produce more power than it uses. Um, I really believe in what we're putting out in the universe, and that we are leaving behind something that is exemplary, that's good for people, that's good for the planet. So that makes it really easy for me then to go out and talk to people about it in that way. You know, how I find, where work comes in is always a puzzle. Sometimes it's out of a conversation with a seatmate on an airplane ride, or at a party or a fundraiser. It a lot of it becomes, or a lot of it started as one-on-one relationships. I would say, in the last 10 years, people see work and then contact us, but it's still okay. How do you kind of pull them in, or reel in the catch at that point? And that is an act of selling, and it's an act of building that first architecture. As I said earlier, it's building a sound foundation with someone that has an edge to it, right, in the relationship.
What's the edge?
I think the edge is always, we're going to challenge you. If we work together, it's going to be a challenging process. And, you know, um, there are certain clients that accept that wholeheartedly, and there's others that are surprised by it. Um, and I think in the end, everyone looks back. Again, I can think of clients saying things to me like, "Wow, I never would have expected this when we started, but it's exactly what I wanted."
Huh?
You know, um, so I think explaining to someone that we're going to be in a conversation for, the better part of 3 years. It takes, designing a home might be the gestation of a human being, but building it's another couple of years on top of that. So it becomes a long-term relationship in some respect. And so
Do you
building
go
that
ahead?
confidence, I think, is important. And I like the connection. I really always love, when I meet someone, it's like, so you're from where? Oh, I was through there, or you went to college here, and there's that 6 degrees of separation game I enjoy as a way of sort of connecting.
Huh. When I sell my work, I frequently talk about the fact that the experience will be challenging,
Mhm.
or I will say, not it's not going to be hard. It might be, but I will say I will challenge you. And this concept that I wrote about in my book is called passionate ambivalence. And I think there's an element within the idea is that you can be incredibly passionate about a piece of work, but at some level you need to be slightly unattached to whether or not that job, whether you get to do the work. You have to kind of keep a little detachment there, or else you're not attractive enough as a prospect to actually get the work.
Yes,
Do
yes.
you agree with that?
I agree with that. My experience in that, and it took me a long time to arrive to a confident point where I could be somewhat ambivalent. And I remember a client saying, "I really want to work with you, but your fee is too much." And I think prior to that point, this was probably 12 years ago or so, I would have said, well, I'll adjust my fee. And in that conversation, I said, well, that's what it costs to work with Arch11 and to get the quality that you're looking for. And they signed the contract. So
Sure.
that was a big lesson. It was a
Yeah.
big lesson. An actual test of you know, I guess valuing one's work.
Do you ever use that notion of the idea of you challenging someone? Do you think of it consciously at all as a selling point for you? Like I think of it as a selling point for me. The people that I work with as an executive coach, they almost never get challenged actually, because they're
Mm.
usually in charge of the thing that they're doing.
Right, right.
And in order to work with you, somebody has to be, it can't be their first home. It usually wouldn't be. They also are probably in charge, as it were, of lots of people. So do you think it lights people up that they get to be challenged?
I think it does. And, if I think about the corporate headquarters work we've done, they've been with very in tune CEOs who are successful in their place because they have challenged their industry.
Huh.
And that's what's risen to a point where they're like, oh, okay, we built the business. Now we're building a corporate headquarters. Their very nature is that. So I think they enjoy that. On the home front, I think some people are surprised. Oh, this is going to be challenging. I thought I'm just buying, an Audi 7 with these, ideas, these features. And I don't push it so much in the home because I really talk about it being more like we're in a dance together. And we are going to challenge you with some of the ideas, but you're going to see them all. You're going to be inside the computer or inside a set of 3D goggles, and you'll be able to understand it. And it might be different than what you expected.
Do you ever, another thing I think about a lot is saying no to work that is sort of outside my zone of genius, or maybe just outside of my pleasure, candidly,
Yeah,
what I want to be up to, or if it's a
yeah.
person that I know would be just absolutely no fun to work with. How often do you think about declining work? How often do you do it?
Not often enough. No, I am so fortunate right now. I have great clients and really good projects. And I mean, used to be, and I said this to the office, the studio, and right now our studios, we're 12 people and it's really great size. I can keep my head around most everything. Um, I think when I was younger, I believed that I had that sort of poverty mentality. Oh, I got to take everything to, you know, pay the mortgage, pay my salary, pay everyone's health care. And I took on projects that probably I shouldn't have, that were miserable, or I took on clients that didn't want architecture.
Huh.
And that's a big piece right there. There's plenty of building, but you have to have someone who really wants architecture. I years ago did a restaurant for a fellow who was about 10 years older than me at the time. And we came to a point where we decided that we were going to mutually fire one another. And we did. And he went on to finish the project. And like 5 or 7 years later, I found myself next to him on a flight to San Francisco. And he apologized to me. He said, "You were right. You were right to fire me because I was a miserable client."
Huh.
Um, so I think now when we interview people, um, it is as much about them understanding who we are as for me to understand who it is I'm going to be working with. And maybe it's because I've gotten older and you realize time is super valuable and you don't want to spend that really valuable commodity in an unpleasant situation or doing work that we're not suited for or doing work with someone who's going to really push against it, not in a good way, you know. So yeah, I've become a little bit more selective in my years and
Yeah.
experience.
I'm glad to hear that. I personally think it's a great selling mechanism to have that selectivity.
Yeah,
And yeah.
Well, you are what you do. That's the other part of it. So, when I was 22 people, it was a big nut to crack. I was taking on a lot of things and a lot of homes. And I had two partners at the time, um, and couldn't keep track of everything at the degree and level that I wanted. And we took on some projects that, we shouldn't have. And what I mean by you are what you do, people see that work, and then that might attract a certain client. Um, and so that was I quickly recognized that enough to recalibrate and readjust. Cut the studio back down to a size that was manageable and allows us to take the work that is best for us and that we're best at.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. That sounds really humane.
Yeah,
So,
it's a joy.
uh, our shared friend, Scott Peppett,
Mhm.
I was with him a couple weeks ago, and he talked to me about how he views this next chapter in life. And he's not the first person probably who has ever said this, but he's the first person who's said it in my presence, which is he thinks about this next chapter as chapter 3, and how I'm late 50s, you and I are the same age essentially, and he's thinking about just how to use this time or how to think about this time. And I wonder about this for you. Um, you, if you're spending 3 years on a dance with a client, you have a few or whatever, I don't know, some number of dances, fewer than 20 left that you're going to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And I do feel about you like you think of yourself as a craftsman, as an artist, as an architect. Like it's very, this stuff I think is just so in your blood. Your gifts are so in your blood. I view them as so valuable. How are you thinking about like what are the 5 things you want to still do as an architect if you know, or what's the lens for finding those?
The lens for finding those, I mean, I think again, it goes back to the cultivation of projects that have an interested client, that have a realistic budget, that have a level of challenge for me that's interesting. Um, I'm I've got a client right now. We've been talking for 12 years about
Wow.
building a house, and
Wow.
he has finally made an exit that puts him in a place where he can do that. And so I'm excited about that because in those 12 years, we've gotten to know each other very well. And he took it upon himself to really educate himself about modern architecture. I was living in LA. He visited all the case study homes, and I would feed him things to go look at. So I'm ready to do a really exciting project with him. Um, the New York project has opened up a world of professionalism that in the building trades and the consultants that I, was finally, I feel like matched in what we do. So I love the idea of maybe another urban project like that. Um, but you're right. There's maybe, I don't know, 10 good projects left. And that's where I look at that and I look at the time. And at this point in life, I've outlived my parents, I've outlived the partner, and you realize the value of the time and then the value of if there's just 10 projects, let's be selective and make sure they're the right 10.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, just
and
since you're here and just since we're talking and just since you don't often, I don't know how often you do stuff like this. But this will go well beyond, this, people will hear this all over the place.
yeah,
Um, if you, beyond what you've shared about chemistry, the match, the context you want to have for how you engage with somebody,
yeah.
uh, is there could you add any, what is your, we call it in my line of work, it's called a BHAG, I think, who came up with this
Very something or other. Yeah, yeah,
big, hairy, audacious goal, Jim Collins.
yeah.
And so if there's one thing that you just still dream about, boy, that's I have one of these. I have like a BHAG for this book.
Mhm.
And yeah, is there a BHAG project for you?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
Um,
Because you're here, like the
Yeah,
universe is, or at least
it,
some people are listening.
it's not a big house, it's a good house.
Okay, a good
It,
house.
yeah,
And it's a house.
yeah, I mean, I think I'd love the intimacy of the residence. And yeah, I would love to do another corporate headquarters. We've done three that really were wonderful experiences. And really, you know, those are houses as well. The corporate headquarters is a custom home for a corporation. And that's exactly how we treated it, and that's why they were successful.
That's cool.
Um, we're finishing up the Wild Bear Science Center, and I walked through that about a year ago, and I was walked around and thought, if I was hit by a bus the next day, that would be a good legacy to leave.
Oh.
I've been inside it, and it's like I realized, well, it's sort of our first ecclesiastical building. So
Oh.
um, I, I think one of those goals would be to do some form of ecclesiastical building before I leave this
Oh.
planet. Um, and I don't know what that means. And then the house piece, as you know, I spend some time in Portugal now, and I've been just admiring the concrete work there. That's just phenomenal. And I would love to find, the client, the budget, the place where we're doing a concrete house. And it's just they're beautifully, you can sculpt it. It's just amazing. So that might be one of those things. And given the fire hazard that we
Yeah.
live in, that's really kind of maybe one way to make it happen. I have a very young client who are in the gaming industry and had a lot where we looked at doing exactly that, a concrete home with fire shutters that were dropping down to protect windows and things. So um, yeah, I don't know that I'm answering your question. I think, it's sort of like Frank Lloyd Wright was once asked, what's your best project? And he said the next one. And
Yeah.
I think the opportunity, I'll know it when I see the opportunity, right? I'll know it when it comes in. But I haven't really um, so much planned. I started without a business plan. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to do this, 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 and grow like this. And so I think to answer your question, it'll make itself known what the big, hairy, audacious project is. Um,
EJ, when one of the things I think a lot about is how I show up in community
mhm.
and the decisions I make, the discretionary decisions I make to try to add value to community and to
Right.
people just
Yeah.
when they ask.
Yeah.
And one thing I really appreciated about you is twice, uh, because we're friends, but I think you have done work for me that you would never do. Like it's not your dream. It's not visionary. Like I don't even really tell people that you were involved because I don't think you want your phone to ring with this kind of stuff. I love my little 1950 house, but it's just not that thing. The other thing was cool. The thing before it was super cool. And and I wonder in this case, or just generally, I think that's a big part of building traction to get to the projects you really want. And I wonder if you think about it that way or how you
I,
think about it.
yeah, I think I'll go back to the architecture of the relationship. That's important to me. So if the architecture of a relationship with a client is great and good and it's a good dance, then doing a small project or a repeat project, we do a lot of repeat projects for clients that are small or a kitchen remodel, but it's because it's fun to work with them. Um, the other aspect of community work for me is there's the architectural community, which I feel like we've taken on projects that were not necessarily going to be projects that we could make money on, but were important to me architecturally. Like we've restored a couple of the Charles Hartling homes in town, and that was really important to me.
Can you say that name just so people can hear it a little
Yeah,
more clearly?
Yeah, Charles Hartling, who
Yeah,
was
and
a,
we'll put that in the show notes because his name has an unusual spelling. Thanks.
yes, it does. And we just finished a home, restoring a home in Knollwood that he did in 1974. And basically, we had to rebuild it from the inside out. Um, I took his children through it who are our age, just because I want to say, look, I really honored what your father did here, and I want you to see that. And we brought it into the current day. So I feel some responsibility to the architectural community of Boulder, and then to the cultural community. The same house I spent last week with the Boulder Ballet in the home, filming dancers in different spaces of the home, so that we're building a film for the ballet to use as a fundraising device, and that was wonderful. I really got a kick out of that. Maybe
As it were.
my next life, I want to come back as a film director.
Yeah, it's not too late.
No, it's very spatial. It's very much like directing architecture. So
Yeah. Well, EJ, thank you so, so much.
thank you for the
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah. And please, those of you listening, please go look at is the Harling House in Knollwood on your site now?
It is not. It is not. We have to, the architecture world, that publishing world is very particular, and they don't want anything to be up even on one's website before they put it into a publication.
Okay, all right. So keep your eyes out. This is the one of probably more than one of the homes that has a rock running through it. I think that's the one you're referring to, right?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
one that is built against the rock, and we lovingly restored. It was great to have a conversation with Charles Hartling, who left this world 30 or 40 years ago.
Way too early.
Way too early. It was,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So I mean, I always love our conversations, and
Me too.
anytime I get to talk about architecture, that's a greater plus. So.
Thanks, EJ. And thank you all for listening. This is not an opportunity that you'll get a lot to hear. Just one of the most, well, to hear EJ talk publicly about his work and even yeah, I mean, his work in many ways speaks for itself, and you'll have a chance to look at it when you visit arch11.com. And just in terms of authentic selling and authentic working and authentic creating, he's an inspiration to me. So I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit from him and how he thinks about having grown his business over the last 30 years. And I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, if you'd like to see EJ actually on video, visit the Hey Sue channel on YouTube, and you'll see these podcasts, the whole collection of them. And if you're interested in learning more about Never Ask for the Sale, heck, go buy it. It's not a huge investment. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sue.